Li-Anne, welcome. Look, I'm hoping we can start with your story because you found the spiritual path very young. In fact, you said you were 8 and the result of quite severe suffering. Would you like to tell us that part of your story?
Um, well, I came from a fairly dysfunctional, I guess, family, and there was a lot of I don't want to go into absolute details into things because I don't think it's
No.
particularly helpful. But
Yeah.
it was a less than ideal childhood, and which ended up having me run away, being kicked out of the house and running away from home from a very young age.
Yeah.
And so, wandering the streets at night, I came across a Buddhist temple, and that was I was in Singapore at the time, and so it was a Buddhism was around me. It wasn't totally novel. But so was Christianity, and so was Islam, a whole bunch of and Taoism. So for me, all the religions had this commonality, and as a child, I really didn't know the difference between them. I just could tell if someone was kind or not. And there were just some people in my life that I really felt knew something different from other people. And I wanted to learn all I could from all of those people who knew something more.
The person you found who became your teacher was a Burmese monk. Is that right?
The person I found initially was, I found a few people who were pivotal in my life. One was an Irish Catholic nun in the convent I was in. Another was a few Buddhist monks in the temple not far from my home. And they taught me the basics of what I would just say is loving kindness, metta. They taught me to be a decent person. They taught me the foundations of what a child actually needs to learn about. It was only later on that I started really practicing in the Burmese tradition. But at that time, it was a Thai forest monastery.
And so through your teenage years, I guess, you began doing daily meditation practice and retreats. Is that right?
I started retreats later in my life. During my teenage years, I tried to meditate through a book. I didn't speak enough Thai to really understand what they were trying to teach me. I understood the basics, but I couldn't get the nuance of what else needed to happen. So I tried following a book awfully unsuccessfully because as a teenager, just trying to make up what the book said I should experience. And so I think a lot of my early meditation was actually fictionalizing what I was really experiencing. And so it was only, sorry?
Wishful thinking, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think that happens quite a lot for meditators. They kind of maybe have had one little glimpse of something and they try to recreate that and then perhaps imagine that that could be it. So I did spend a lot of time struggling with that before eventually coming across fantastic teachers who actually guided me as to a better approach. And those were my Burmese teachers.
Yeah. And, but not in Burma or in Burma?
In Burma, in Malaysia, Burmese teachers in Malaysia, Burmese teachers who came to Australia, and other teachers including Sky in Australia as well. So all around the world, I really had this idea that I wanted to learn from anyone who could teach me anything. And so I sought out teachers from across the world.
And so what made you, when you were older, decide to study psychology, cognitive science? What was that in any way related to your Dharma practice, or was it different?
I think psychology was a natural movement when I was 17 after finishing high school that I had this need to know about human psychology and suffering. And, really, it was very clear to me that there was suffering and I needed a way out of it. And I was going to learn anything I could from anyone who might be able to offer something. And so studying psychology was the obvious first step.
So Li-Anne, did you find common themes? Were the two compatible, Eastern meditation and Western psychology and psychotherapy? Or
Not initially. Initially, during my Bachelor of Psychology, I ended up arguing with a whole bunch of people who didn't seem to get what the deeper. I mean, I was in Western Australia in the early 90s, where basically the only way psychology was talked about was cognitive behavioral therapy. And I kept saying, there's more. There's a lot in the unconscious. There's a lot of habits that I know I can't just think my way out of. But that was the way things were framed at that time, and I knew there was more. So that's when I moved into cognitive science and other ways of approaching human suffering, I guess.
And the human mind.
Yes, yes.
And do you think your study of neuroscience and cognitive behavior helped your understanding of the Dharma, of the way the Buddha explains the mind?
I think it helped me really question what might be happening. But when I initially approached the Dhamma, it was exactly through whatever my teachers taught. So I didn't try to bring it together whatsoever. I'm very fortunate, I think, that I'm actually a very good student in the sense that I never feel like I know. And so if I go to a new teacher, I'm always open to anything they teach me in the way they teach me without sort of interjecting in my mind even about what might or might not be happening. It's only after I feel like I've learned something in my own experience through what they've taught me that I think that integration happens. So that's always a post hoc thing.
Are you talking about your Dharma teachers or about the Western teachers, or both?
Both, and everything. This call, I had no idea what you were going to ask me, and I was happy not knowing. I'm always open to whatever emerges from conversations.
And it's the same thing. But I'm sort of just going through your story, but we'll get to your technique in a minute. But I just wanted to say it's an extraordinary life because you've also managed, with all that study, you managed to have a family.
Oh, that was accidental.
Many mothers would say that. So I really don't know how you manage it all, but well done.
I think that was actually just youth and foolishness. Thinking that was the stage where I thought I could do everything.
Yeah.
I learned from that, and I wouldn't deliberately put myself through things, but at that time it kind of felt very natural, and I had boundless energy. I don't think I have boundless energy anymore.
I'm not sure if this is related, but my next question was, you're going along very well. You're doing all this study. I gather you're still doing lots of meditation. And then in your book, you say you hit what you describe as a dark night of the soul, which was actually diagnosed as PTSD. Do you know what happened and what caused that? And what did that experience bring to you?
It was a very interesting time. I was meditating a lot because I tend to be a little bit obsessive when I sink my teeth into it. So I was meditating a lot. I was also exploring psychotherapy because I was training to be a psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So there was a lot of stuff happening there. And so there were a lot of influences at that time. What actually, the physicality of what happened was basically a lot of flashbacks and a lot of visceral reactions to my experiences of life. And so it was pretty classic PTSD as described in the textbooks. But I happened to go on a meditation retreat with a very astute teacher who asked me, hang on, because I said, I've got PTSD, so I'd like, if it's possible, to check in with you every day because I don't want to sort of go off course. And he said, that's fine. And then he said, hang on a sec, step back here. When did this first happen? And so I described it happened during a meditation sit. And then I described a lot more of what I experienced. So it turns out that I was, and then that's when he kind of said, that's fine. That's just a dukkha jnana. That's the fear jnana. And then we just went through the whole thing. He normalized the whole experience as something that sometimes happens to some people. And this is what you do. And so that was the important piece that I didn't have. I didn't have any sense of this was okay. There was any way out. There was no, so this teacher was absolutely brilliant in being able to say, normalize that and say, and this is what you do. And this is what it's about.
So this happens to quite a few meditators, did your teacher say?
It has happened to a number of people in different circumstances. I have students now who come to me to ask me about that, assuming that just because they're experiencing a lot of fear, for example, that they are in the dukkha jnanas. And I have to remind them that dukkha is the suffering part, but the jnana is the knowledge part. And actually, the dukkha jnana is actually gaining knowledge through whatever suffering you're encountering.
Yeah.
So going through that process, even though it was pretty extreme in my case, because of my background, was simply my own expression of the dukkha. And the jnana part was the wisdom that unfolded as a result of knowing how to practice in a wiser way.
Yeah, I'm using a quote from your book here. You say it led to a seismic change in your worldview, your understanding of the Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more there?
Whereas before it would have been, let's say, a lot of shaking in the body, visceral reactions from a flashback that was happening and another flashback happening and more visceral reactions, and they'd be moving in a circle, a loop. And each time a flashback happened, there'd be more visceral reactions. And then there'd be a reaction in my system, in my mind, going, not this again. And that would exacerbate the shaking and exacerbate the onset of flashbacks. Being able to see that this was just the cycle of what happens when there is that mind's reaction of aversion, it automatically exacerbates that the reactions. When I saw the aversion as a separate entity, I was able to explore that and understand that this is actually what the Buddha talked about as one of the main causes of suffering. This is, in terms of the second noble truth. And so being able to isolate the sensations, the feelings, the onset, the expression of aversion when it was there, as separate from the actual physicality of the flashback, allowed me to examine it, investigate it, explore it, understand it, appreciate it, and appreciate how its impact on life when it's there. And similarly, appreciate the impact of life when it was not there. So there were other times when I started seeing that a flashback would occur, the shaking would start, and I noticed there was no aversion, and the shaking would settle on its own. There was an understanding in the mind, saw through that cycle, and the cycle broke itself.
So it sounds like you were able to take quite an objective look at some of your past experiences that were coming up in meditation.
Yeah, and I think it was not so much taking an objective look on the past experiences, but it was taking an objective look on the present effects and the mind's reaction to the present effects, the mind's current reaction. And so my mind was no longer holding on to the past experiences, but it was rather seeing the mind's current reactions and seeing it from an objective perspective.
And was this when you were able to, as you say in the book, straighten the bars that were in your life, that you'd seen in your life? It was sort of crooked and they gradually straightened.
Yeah, well, I definitely had no say in that one. I didn't do that. That just seemed to happen. It seemed when it was clearer, that seemed to be what was happening. It was just a descriptive term.
So you're on different paths, but amazing paths. You know, these experience in meditation and obviously working towards a PhD. You're doing your practice, you're a mother, you're teaching meditation, raising a family. How did you did you compartmentalize your life? Like, at this time of day, I'm a mother, at this time of day, I'm a meditator? Or did you sort of combine it, bringing all the strings together?
Yeah, no, the idea of compartmentalizing my life never crossed my mind. You know, people said, how did you do it? It's like, it just didn't cross my mind to do that. It just didn't make sense. It kind of went into my brain as does not compute when someone asked me that. And for me, life is, you can't compartmentalize it. Sure, when I was in my teacher's monastery, I was a meditator. And because I'd spent a lot of effort and a lot of time making sure my kids were all right, organizing everything such that they would be okay for the period I was there. So when I was there, I was fully there. But when I came home, I was fully home with the experiences and the insights gained from the monastery. So I knew that my job was always to bring my understandings into life. So it didn't matter if I was interacting with my kids or speaking to a patient or interacting with a stranger on the street. It was all the Dhamma. So for me, it was all the same.
It sounds like a fabulous way to be a mother, to be able to stand back a bit, you know, because kids can be pretty annoying. So stand back and, as I said before, objectify it a bit. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, what I found, one of the most so I come across this way of looking at my mind's reaction towards greed and aversion, and one of the most fascinating things I did when I went home was I took my son to his basketball game like I usually did, and he was playing basketball, and I saw the mind's reaction, an impulse lurching forward to go shoot that goal, get it. And instead of continuing on with the story of wanting him to shoot the goal and get that, I became more interested in the mind going, lurching forward. And so that sort of lurching or pushing away became my main sort of practice. And that became far more interesting. I was still there for the practice. I still saw whether he scored the goal or not, but I was more interested in my mind's reaction to the various different things.
Yeah. Let's move on to I guess it's the meditation technique, really a way of living you were talking about in your book, Get Off the Cushion. And it's really, as I understand it, saying that we can practice throughout our everyday lives. Now, most of us, you know, who've been involved with the Dharma think that if we do our 20 minutes, half hour meditation morning and evening on the cushion, that's our practice for the day. But you're saying take it further.
Yes. And of course, I mean, it depends on how sometimes people limit the definition of meditation to perhaps placing your attention on the breath at the nostrils or something like that. And so that's a very limited definition of meditation. If we sort of think of it more in terms of the Dhamma definition of meditation, is the training of the mind. What are we training the mind to do to cultivate attention and awareness? Why are we doing that? To be able to move towards more peace and wisdom. Then we've got the whole vision of why we're doing this, and we know what we are doing. And so that very limited thing of keeping your attention on the breath, the nostrils, or whatever your particular practice is, becomes just one small facet of this entire training towards peace and wisdom, not just on the cushion, but everywhere in your life, with every interaction you have. And so that is really what meditation is. So if we remember the big picture of why we're meditating, we can actually remember to incorporate it more in life.
So as I understand it, a key point seems to be working with attention and awareness throughout your day in your daily life. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what you mean? First, perhaps attention?
Sure. Attention is what we all know is, and some people mistakenly believe that the seated meditation exclusively trains. You know, if you can keep your attention on, let's say, your the movement of your breath for the whole 20 minutes or hour or 2 hours or whatever amount of time you're doing it, we think that's a good sit. And if not, it's a bad sit in some sort of sense in our mind. But actually, the attention part is only a tiny fraction of the more important part of meditation, which is the awareness part. The awareness allows us to know that our attention has moved away into thoughts. If our attention is on our thoughts, it's there. If it's on there, something on a thought, it's there. And if it's on the sensation here, your attention's been moving there. So your attention can move around. The only way we have a bigger perspective on what's happening is through awareness. And so training that awareness actually, first and foremost, needs to happen in order to be able to train that attention. And after you've trained the attention, all the training of attention does is it stabilizes the mind such that it can move more to more of what the Dhamma offers. And so that awareness piece is actually the more important part. And so that's what I emphasize a lot more. And that's why I encourage people to train throughout their daily lives, in every moment of their lives, in fact.
Well, let's take an example. Say we're going shopping.
Mm-hmm.
So your attention is probably on, tell me if I've got this right, your attention is probably on what you want to buy, your purchases, but your awareness is what, taking in the whole shop and other customers. And have I got that right? Is that
how? Your awareness could be on that, or you could narrow that scope of awareness a little bit more to noticing. Let's say you've decided that you'd like to cultivate your patience a little bit more. Okay, so let's say that's just what your aim is in this particular week, month, whatever. So you can, at the beginning of the day, remind yourself, that's what I'd like to do. So you keep your awareness on your level of patience. So you're in a hurry in the shops, you've got that list, you've got all these things, and these people are in the middle of the aisle, and your impatience arises quite strongly, and you're getting quite agitated, rather than going into the story of, oh, they shouldn't be there, they need to get out of the way, I need to go right now. Instead of doing all that, you're aware of that impatience that's arisen, and you do something about it. You take wise action at that point. You calm yourself down a little bit, remembering that you have chosen to actually cultivate better patience. And so you bring that awareness to that particular goal. This goes the same so people who get impatient in traffic. So next thing, you finish your shopping, you're in the car, and there's a traffic jam. You're getting annoyed at that, and you see silly behavior there, and you're getting angry at that as well. Are you checking in on your patience there? Are you cultivating that peace of mind that you were hoping for in that 20-minute sit in the morning? Are you continuing to cultivate that awareness that gives you more wisdom in terms of how you might act from here on?
Do you have to bring, like in the shop, do you have to sort of, with your impatience, do a little technique like concentrate on your breathing, something like that? Or do you do it all through attention and awareness?
First, we need to know that the impatience has gotten the better of us. If we don't even know that, it's just going to usurp our every action. So that's where the awareness comes in. Once you're aware of something, then yes, you can take a few deeper breaths, longer out breaths, just calm your system a little bit, and then go ahead. So you don't have to be, you're certainly not going to be stopping in the middle of the aisle, closing your eyes and coming back to your breath. Just a couple of deeper breaths. And you can do that while continuing to walk, while continuing to do other things. The whole idea of that is just to bring your nervous system down a little bit, if it's impatience that we're working with, so that we don't get overwhelmed by the impatience and have that drive our actions.
So going back to my original starting point, is should we keep our sitting down on the cushion meditation practice so that these techniques work together?
Or absolutely.
Can you leave the cushion completely?
No, absolutely. I have heard a number of students who leave the cushion and then wonder why their attention gets flitted from one thing to another, or they get caught by their social media, which actually is there to grab their attention, and they wonder why they don't have that stability. I mean, seated meditation doesn't just have to be working on attention. It can also be working on awareness. And in fact, I think that's even more powerful when you actually work more on awareness and then you bring attention into the puzzle later on. But the more aware we are, the more consciously we can live. And surely that leads us to a wiser existence.
Li-Anne, you talk about modern life and how it's very stressful for a lot of people. And in that context, you talk about just bring it down a notch as perhaps a starting point. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I've met a lot of, I teach online, so I teach people from all over the world, and very, very experienced meditators. Most of my students are very experienced meditators. And I've come across way too many very experienced meditators who've been meditating for a very, very long time, decades, who still find that they get caught up in the stress of life. Now, stresses in life happen, but do we have to get caught in them every single time? And I've been surprised at how many people get caught in the stresses of life, despite having all the techniques they need to have to be able to stop that cycle, break that cycle, and create a new habit. And so the whole idea of taking things down a notch was to be able to just be aware, give your stress levels a number. Okay, it's at 8 right now. Take a few deeper breaths. Deeper breaths just help give a physiological response to the brain to calm down. Then smile to yourself for a job well done. Do that positive reinforcement, because that's the best way the brain works, when we positively reinforce our actions.
To realize that you're bringing your stress levels or your anxiety levels down. Yeah. So,
and I guess the important part of that was I gave the example of a stress level of being level 8. Well, it doesn't have to go down to 0. It doesn't have to go down to 1. It can just go down in the right direction. It's now 7.5. Yes, I'm on the right track. Yeah. Well done, me.
Yeah. And so you're learning to practice, as I understand it, really in every waking moment of your life, or is that too much?
Not at all. I think if we're more aware in every moment, now we're not saying that we bring the stress levels down at every moment, because sometimes you've got a stress level of 2 and it doesn't really matter. If you can still be aware of, so we have more, if our stress levels are high, our bandwidth for processing life and coping with life reduces. If it's at a manageable level, then we have more bandwidth to be able to be more aware of other things. And we can be more interested in other people, in other things, and in ourselves. And that's ultimately what I encourage people to get to, informing this new habit of reducing their stresses, so that the reaction to stress is never a problem. Now we can work with, you know, what I call the second half of the book, the other interesting things of the Dhamma.
And another difficult area is when we get those unhelpful, negative, and self-critical thoughts. Like you notice, you know, your awareness is telling you they're coming up. How do you suggest we deal with those?
What I usually say surprises students initially. They'll report, you know, I noticed this really unhelpful thought happening, and I usually say, that's great. And they look at me very, very strangely, because it's great because they've noticed that. If they didn't notice that, that would mean that they would automatically believe it and fall in the cycle of that story. Whereas in that space of noticing, in that awareness, they are separated enough to recognize this is what's happening. From that space of awareness, they have a choice to believe the thought or to choose something else, to choose to do something else, to choose to put their attention somewhere else. And so it's okay that that thought arose, because that's just nature. That's just the automatic habit that your mind got into due to previous conditioning. But in this moment, it's arisen and you noticed it. You smile to the awareness. Thank you. Thank you for giving me that space from that to not just believe it automatically. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to form a new habit. That new habit could be questioning, is that actually true? Is it a fact? It could be recognizing, it's somewhat true, but not entirely true. It could be a whole bunch of different things, but it gives you an opportunity to create a new habit of pattern of mind.
And you're saying it can also help our relationships, you know, girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, whatever. How?
Well, if we're more aware of how we're feeling, we might, for example, in a conversation, be aware that we're getting impatient. Back to the impatience thing. Impatience was something that I had to work with a lot. So I have a lot of experience with that. So you can notice that perhaps you're quite impatient in what they're saying. You just can't wait to say what you want to say. Tell them about your day. Or you might notice that they're saying something and it's hurt you. And rather than react from that space of hurt or anger and sort of get into a spiral of hurt to throwing out more hurt, you recognize that you're hurt. You calm yourself down, and then you see if you can come from a bigger space to discover what else might be happening. There's so many different ways to use interactions with other people to learn more about yourself, to learn more about them, actually listening to them, and to learn more about what you are creating in that moment and the potentiality of what could be happening instead of those old patterns.
And is part of that bringing more loving kindness, more metta into relationships, or is that another technique?
Yeah, I mean, you know, loving kindness always comes into it. Loving kindness for ourselves seems to be sometimes lacking more than anyone else. So being able to actually be kind to yourself, you know, if, let's say, a negative self-deprecating thought arose, can you be kind to yourself knowing that you didn't, look, if you really didn't want it to arise, and if you had any control over it, it wouldn't have arisen. The fact is, you didn't have any control over it, it just arose. So recognizing that in a kind way, not kicking yourself because it arose. And it's the same thing with other people.
Yeah. So I understand with your teaching, some of your students don't realize you're coming from a Buddhist background. So I was wondering how this does relate to traditional teaching, to the Buddhist teaching, for example, of the Eightfold Path. And I know you talk quite a bit about right effort. Perhaps we could begin there, which is what, number 3 or 4 on the path, isn't it?
Yeah, just to clarify, all my students know I come from a Buddhist.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, all my meditation students do know that I come, and because that's how they found me.
Yeah.
Perhaps you were thinking about the patients that I used to work with. So that was more in a secular setting.
Yeah.
So
I'll ask you about that in a minute. But,
sure. Okay, right effort. Where would you like me to start with right effort?
Well, how does that relate to awareness, anxiety, and doing this practice throughout your life?
Okay, so
do you put in?
Yep. So right effort simply means choosing some right effort. Let's call it wise effort. Okay. So this is the importance of awareness. When there is awareness of whatever's happening, whether it's you getting angry at someone who's cut you off on the freeway, or you being a thought that's happened in your meditation, that's arisen in your meditation, or whatever. Whenever you're aware of whatever's happening, the first bit of right effort is to smile at the awareness, appreciate the fact that this is what's gotten you out of just a mindless loop of habitual patterns of mind. So that's the first step of wise effort. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the pull towards, let's say, believing that negative way of that self-deprecating thought that came up, maybe that pull, that attraction is too strong, then the right effort is appreciating that and very quickly going on to something, putting your attention onto something else. You can ask yourself, what else am I aware of? Bring your attention to, let's say, your bodily sensations, your posture, or what's around you. That's certainly wiser than going into believing that self-deprecating thought and making yourself feel more suffering from there. So wise effort only is possible, is only vaguely possible if there's awareness. And hence my emphasis on awareness. When we appreciate awareness, we encourage that awareness to arise more and more frequently. And then when it arises, then we have the option of taking wise effort. Otherwise, all our actions are going to be these habitual things, good and bad.
Now, this can all seem very serious and quite, hard work, concentrating all day in a way. But you say it should bring enjoyment. There should be in your practice. So does that happen naturally, or do you have to work on that?
You just need to remind yourself. So what I usually say to my students who start with me is, at the beginning of the day, remind yourself. So your task for the day, for each day, is to at the end of the day reflect on 3 things that you might be grateful for. Which means at the beginning of the day, you want to remind yourself that you've got a task at the end of the day. So all day, be on the lookout for things you appreciate. Be on the lookout. In other words, we're building the awareness. We're building the awareness, not just building the awareness on fairly neutral things, but on things that are beneficial to the system. And so when you're looking out for things to appreciate, there's going to be joy that emerges from this whole process. If someone smiles to you and you have that slight warm feeling, you can notice that and you appreciate that. That joy arises quite spontaneously from that process of gratitude. So that process of building awareness through appreciation and thereafter joy becomes this positive reinforcement for the building of awareness.
I've sort of been monopolizing here, but if anyone has a question, let me know, or you could write it in the chat room. Any questions so far? Okay, I can't see any, so we'll keep going a little longer, and if there's no questions, Li-Anne, I might just ask you to perhaps finish with a meditation, if that's okay.
Sure.
Look, a phrase I liked from your book is, talking about awareness, is just ask yourself what is happening right now, sort of check in. So that works for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will automatically get drawn to whatever our attention brings us to. That's just the way our brains are. Attention's a lot louder, I guess, in terms of its pull than this subtler awareness, which is why it takes some time for people to differentiate between attention and awareness. But awareness, that perspective, that bigger picture, that is always there. So in order to move back to that space of awareness, just asking what's happening right now. Like if I were to ask anyone here, you might be aware of these tiles in front of you in this while you're looking at the screen, or you might be aware of, you know, a white shirt and hands moving all over. You might be aware that you're sitting down. You might be aware that you're hot or cold. You might be aware that you are feeling comfortable or uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what you're aware of. That awareness is the precious thing. That awareness is our consciousness. And that is what we want to learn to appreciate more and more.
So what do you do when you suffer from what you've called a really busy mind? Your mind is all over the place. So how do you calm that mind and bring that awareness into it?
The first, if it's really, really busy, that very basic thing of taking a deep breath in and a longer breath out, do that again, will invariably calm the parasympathetic nervous system down a little bit. They use that, this very simple, you know, people might have heard of the box breathing technique and various different techniques. Basically, the idea is to actually breathe out, particularly out longer. And that makes it a lot, I think my video's gone off, sorry. Don't know why. That out breath really, really helps the parasympathetic nervous system relax a lot more. So if your mind's too busy, let's relax it. And then we can move on to other things. But until you can relax your mind sufficiently, calm your mind sufficiently, there's no point trying to figure out what to do. No, the flustering will just get more flustered.
Okay. And another thing you say, that as you get into this practice, you'll begin to notice more things about yourself, about qualities or tendencies. Like you talk of some people have a tendency towards perfectionism.
Mm.
You know, what do you do when you notice these things about yourself?
Well, first, smile to the awareness. Really appreciate the fact that you've noticed. If you've noticed a tendency towards perfectionism, I would bet anything that tendency's been there all this time. You may not have noticed it before, but you're noticing it now. So this is actually the most important first step. Appreciate that. Unfortunately, what people do is they beat themselves out about what they notice. And then what that does is it punishes the awareness. You know, your awareness has now noticed this very subtle quality about yourself, and you've just said, oh no, I noticed that, as opposed to going, thank you for letting me know that. Now what can I do about it? You can take wise action only from that space of awareness. And so that actually is what people miss the most.
Thank you. Bridget's got a question. Bridget, if you unmute.
Hey, Bridget.
Hi. Yeah, this has been beautiful. Thank you. I'm learning so much. I don't know if this is a question you'd like to answer, but some teachers that I've worked with, for example, Steve Armstrong or the Tejaniya teacher, Alexis Santos, they talk about awareness and that you shouldn't, like, you can notice the quality of your awareness. So you might go, the quality of my awareness is dull, or the quality of my awareness is, there'll be different qualities of our awareness. And I've just wondered, once you do that, once you go, dull, my awareness is dull, or my awareness is impatient, or whatever there, is just to notice it the thing, or should one then go, right, improve my awareness, if you see what I mean, like change, you've noticed what the awareness is,
Yep.
And then is that the job done? You go, okay, I have insight. This is the quality of my awareness right now. I'm in traffic. I'm grumpy, whatever. Or do you, well, that's more of a feeling, but, or do you at that point maybe try and go, okay, shift the awareness into a different, maybe more wholesome state? Any thoughts?
Yeah, noticing whenever you're at space of noticing, so that's quite a subtle thing. You're able to notice whether your awareness is dull or sharp. The fact that you can means that you've got very good awareness. That is great. Celebrate that. That is how you continue cultivating that subtle awareness. Now, unfortunately, a lot of students at that point go, oh no, it's dull. Oh, what did I do wrong? That is punishing that awareness. Whereas if you celebrate the fact that, oh, I noticed that that's dull, this is really quite amazing because I've never before noticed dull awareness and bright awareness, sharp awareness. This is really new. You encourage that awareness to continue noticing these subtle things. And the more subtle qualities we notice with the right attitude, which is the fundamental thing of Sayadaw U Tejaniya's teachings, with the right attitude, the more we'll notice. And then it flows from there. So don't stop the process when you notice dull awareness. Appreciate the fact that you can notice such subtlety. Different when you're talking about noticing that you're getting angry in traffic, because then you might want to take it down a notch so that you don't act from that anger.
Right. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Thanks, Bridget. Anyone else with a question? Sky, perhaps? No? Li-Anne, you're muted, Sky.
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering what role you use with walking as far as part of the daily process, because I often find there's a transition between sitting on a cushion, for example, and standing and then walking to the next activity. And the walking often is a way for me to just check in, how is the body experiencing movement, and it brings me very much into the immediate present. And I think I'm always walking through the day wherever I'm going, and that seems to be something that really helps bring the attention into the body, but also holds the awareness to, oh, here I am standing.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much you use walking and standing in awareness of daily life.
Yeah, I use that a lot actually. I because we are always walking. I mean, I use sitting a lot as well because a lot of people are actually in front of their devices a lot as well. So if you can check in on yourself, but walking certainly, because the body has to move and therefore there are going to be different sensations in different parts of the body. It's a really, really nice way. And of course, I'm not talking about the tradition, the formal slow walking. I'm talking about just normal, at normal pace. And taking, learning from Sayadaw U Tejaniya, I encourage students to really walk at normal pace. Don't slow things down. You can for a different purpose, but in your daily life, just notice that your mind can keep up with even fast walks. It can keep up with anything, really. It's a lot faster than the body. So utilizing that just to check in on bodily sensations is the best way to bring your attention and awareness to bodily sensations.
I sometimes find actually that my mind is way ahead of my body.
Yeah.
It's almost like my body's trying to catch up with my mind, which is jumping way ahead into the future. And it's a good way just to bring it back into here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great talk. It's really interesting.
Thanks, Sky. Any other questions? In the meantime, I've got a couple more questions, and if there aren't any questions, Li-Anne, I might ask you then to give us a brief meditation. But my first question is, you have worked with cancer patients, and we all know someone who either has or has had cancer. How does it help? How does this technique help them? What have you found?
Well, it's the same thing as the aim for why we meditate, why we train our minds. I think most people are looking for some, it might be different words that they use, but I'll use these two words. People are looking for more peace and wisdom. So if I talk to people who are agitated, all they want is peace. But once they've got peace, they also want other things as well. And so how best to live the last few, whatever amount of time they have left, how best to be with their loved ones in the remaining moments of their lives, how best to live in a way that is meaning making for them at this point of their lives. Now, we all are faced with the prospect of death, but it's only when we receive a diagnosis like that we're really, really faced. It's not only then, but that is one of the times where we're really faced with that reality. So being able to live more consciously is really this gift that patients have been able to learn from. And, you know, and I don't know, there's something about meaning making and satisfaction in life that I feel revolves around that ability to be calm and the ability to have clarity. And that combination is I see, I don't know, I think it's it's a commonality to all of us as humans.
Thank you. That's lovely. And my final question, just to wrap things up and bring things back to where we started, is, you know, back to that title. Just some tips for us beginning. How do we weave meditation into our lives?
Just choose one thing you'd like to be working on. Choose one thing that's really important for you. If it's better connections with the people around you, choose that. Don't choose something that's got you think conceptually you should do. What's actually meaningful for you, and choose that as what you'd like to aspire towards. At the beginning of the day, remind yourself, I'd like to be a little bit more connected, for example, to the people, to everyone I'm with, including myself, because I'm with myself most of the time. If that's what you've chosen, remind yourself at the beginning of the day and check in with yourself throughout the day. How connected do I feel? Or how angry do I feel? Or whatever you've chosen. Let's choose one thing alone and keep checking in with yourself throughout the day. And every time you've checked in on yourself, give yourself a smile and a pat on the back. Irrespective of whether you're connected or not connected, you're aware now. And that's ultimately the most important thing.
Thank you, Li-Anne. And I just ask if you could perhaps give us a very brief guided meditation to finish.
Sure.
Have you got a bell or something so we know?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'll leave it with you.
Sure.
And whatever length you think, 5-10 minutes. I'll leave it with you.
Whether you feel like closing your eyes or leaving your eyes open, just be there wherever you're seated and notice how you're feeling right now. Perhaps there's been so much talking that your mind's kind of swimming around in thoughts. Let that be. Noticing, acknowledging, recognizing that that's the situation. Perhaps there are no thoughts or few thoughts. It doesn't really matter what you notice. It's the fact that you're noticing that's important right now. Notice what your body feels like. Is it relaxed or tense? If it's tensed, just relax it consciously by taking a few deeper breaths in and out. And then allowing your breath to resume whatever normal rhythm it's got. How are you feeling right now? If you put a little smile on your face right now, does that feel any different? Keep that smile on your face if it feels better, and don't worry about it if it doesn't. What else are you noticing in this moment? Do you notice sounds, bodily sensations, feelings, thinking? Can whatever you notice be okay, just the way it is? Can you simply be a vessel to hold all the things that are happening for your mind and body in this moment? Lovingly, with acceptance and openness and interest. You may notice your mind wandering off into thinking. If that's happening, smile at the awareness. Thank you for noticing that. Now I'm back. And then you can ask yourself, what's happening in my body? Allowing your attention to rest on whatever might be happening in your body in this moment. We may want peace, but we also need wisdom. Allow yourself to complete that circle of life, to move yourself towards more peace and wisdom. What do you notice now? Whether it's bodily sensations, or breath, or feelings, or hearing, or taste, or smell. Can it all be okay, just the way it is? Now, in a moment, not yet, but in a moment, I'm going to encourage you to open your eyes. But when you open your eyes, I'd like you to continue noticing what your body feels like, what you notice. So when you're ready, open your eyes and let the light come in, while still being aware of how your body feels, of the sounds, of perhaps your bodily sensations and breath, and whatever light is coming through into your eyes. Can you continue knowing how you're feeling, what you're experiencing with your eyes open? Now you're all very still. See if you can move your body and continue noticing how that feels. You can move slowly or fast, but you can notice how that feels. You can still be aware. Of course you're aware. You're awake. You're alive.
Thank you, Li-Anne. That was wonderful, and thank you for everything this evening. It was very profound, and we really appreciate you sharing your time.